Alright, I've had several requests to get going on some videos here. It's something I thought about doing for a while. Figured, why not? Let's give it a go, see how it goes. One of the things I really want to try to do is I want to try to explain, how to get certain looks on flies, like that nicely tapered body, the way to get your hackle to stand up straight so it's not bushy and all over the place. So I'd like to do a little bit extra with these videos aside from just saying, hey, here's this material, tie it on and you're good. So we'll see how it goes. I think I'm going to start with a size 14 Cahill, and in the vise is a size 14 light wire hook. And I'll get my thread going right at the eye and get that going. One of the things I like to do is make sure that I've got my proportions in order before I really tie anything in. I want to make sure that I know how much room I want to leave and what I want to happen. So I'm going to run my thread probably about, about a quarter of the way down or so. And a quarter of the way down this shank will give me plenty of room for hackle in the front. It'll give me room for hackle in the back, nicely tapered body. Everything should be proportioned pretty well. Next thing I want to do is tie in the wings. Now I do my wings a few different ways. I think today I'm going to do the 2 feather method that I use. I'm using Mallard flank that's dyed wood duck. And what I do is I'm going to grab 2 feathers that look pretty much exactly the same, and I kind of prepped them. I put them right up against each other to make sure that they were the right length. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to butt them up back to back so they splay out away from each other. And I know not all of this is on camera, but sometimes lining these up can be a little bit of a pain. And when I stripped them off, I made sure that the tips were all aligned so they're the right length and all that. And I kind of squeeze that down like that. Okay, so that's what it looks like. Now, you want to measure that out about a hook shank in length. So put that out, that looks about good. And then with the feathers stacked, I'm going to keep hanging on to them, and I'm going to put a pinch wrap in there. So I'm going to pinch my thread, wrap it around loosely, and then I'm going to tighten it as that bites down. And then I'm going to continue on with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 wraps, and then I'm going to back that back onto itself. And that's what that should look like. Kind of straighten that out so they're all standing on top of the hook. The next step is something that is really, really important. You want to make sure that you cut this down at a taper. And what I mean by that is if you just cut it off straight, you're going to get a big block of material that you're not going to be able to avoid when you come up with your thread and your dubbing. So I'm going to straighten this out. I'm going to lay my scissors flat right about here where that thread ends. And I'm just going to angle my scissors down, and I'm going to cut that off at an angle. Now, it doesn't look like much right now, but you're going to see as we run our thread down towards the back, that's going to start to have less and less material, and it's going to do the taper for our body very nicely. I also like to put my finger there just to kind of make sure that it stays there and doesn't roll on me. I don't want my materials rolling around to the bottom of the hook. I want everything to stay right up on top. And when you get all those cinched in, that should taper down quite nicely. Now obviously we have more room to fill in, and what we're going to do is fill that in with the tailing material. I like to use these spade hackle feathers. These can be bought pretty much anywhere. They come off the side of a cape. You're not going to wrap this for a dry fly or anything, so you're just going to pull the fibers off and use them for tailing fibers. I've used Coq de Leon, I've used whiting tailing packs, I've used a bunch of different things for tails, I've used fibbits. But I gotta say, I really, really like the spade hackle. It's one I've been using pretty much exclusively. I've got them in all colors. This is going to be a cream for the Cahill. We'll measure that out about a hook shank. Squeeze it so the tips stay aligned. I like to have it facing me because it's going to roll on you a little bit when you put that first turn in. And we'll work it down. Get that tied in. Now, as you work your way back up, you want to make nice, clean, connecting wraps, and if the material rolls on you, just force it back over. You want it to sit right dead on top, because what that's doing is it's filling in the rest of the taper. And if you can slip your fingers in here and grab just the tailing fibers and pull them up, you can see how there's a little gap from here to here that needs to be filled in, and when you get here, this uniform part, that's where our hackle is going to go. So as it goes up that little incline and levels off, right about here is where I want my tailing fibers to end. So I'm going to go in, I'm not going to snip them off right at the base, I'm going to snip them off so that they fold over, and when I tie them, it'll run right up and finish my taper. And there's that. Okay, now you want to bring your thread right to the base of where you tied your wings in, and you want to get those stood up. The way that you do that is obviously a dam in front, which a lot of people are pretty aware of, but I want to go over something real quick. When you grip these feathers, fold them all back, get them nice and tight, and you run some wraps in front for that dam, what you really should do is limit the number of thread wraps that you use to stand those feathers up straight. Big mistake I see is building a big bulky dam in front to hold those feathers up. Now I only put in 4 wraps, and you can see that those wings are already standing almost straight up. When I put the hackle in the front, that'll push them back even more and make them perfect. Now, what'll happen if you make a giant bulky dam in front is when you run your hackle up your hook, when you get to that point, your hackle is going to want to start leaning forward and not standing straight up and down because the stem is being wrapped around that dam that you built. Hopefully that makes sense. So you want to make sure that you have as few thread wraps as possible for your dam, and the way that you do that is just making sure that you're pulling your feathers back nice and tight and just wedging your thread right in at the base. And if you do that, you shouldn't have any problems at all. Now what we need to do is we need to split these. You can use a needle, a bodkin, anything. I'm kind of lazy, so I just go in with my fingers. You want to look right straight dead down the line, and because we use 2 feathers, there should be a little bit of a natural separation from one feather to the next, and you find that somewhere right in the middle, and we're going to run 2 clean wraps right through the middle. Then we're going to come around the other way, and we're going to run 2 clean wraps the other way for a figure 8. And that'll get them split. I don't know what's going on with the focus here, but there we go. So we got those split, and that's what that's going to look like. Now we got to get them to stand up, and we're going to do that with a couple of wraps at the base. So we're going to move our thread away from us, and we're going to take this clump on the far side, and we're going to grip the tips, hold them steady, or else they'll collapse under your thread tension. And we're going to give 1, 2 clean wraps right at the base. Then we're going to come through, we're going to grab the other chunk of wing. I don't know why that's laying down the way it is, but hopefully we can fix that. And we want to run a nice clean wrap around the base. It's kind of tough to get these to lock in and not collapse under your thread tension. But if you can run them through with just the right amount of tension, that's what you want to do. Alright, I gotta back off a little bit here. I gotta redo one of my splitting wraps. That's gonna take up a little time, but something that's gotta be fixed. So 2 wraps there, 2 wraps here. Grip the tips. Get a couple of wraps around the base. Alright, now we're back on track. And again, if you go with just the right amount of tension, you can get those locked in without having to grip them. And there we go. And once you get those in, give a couple of wraps back to save your work. What is happening with the focus? Alright, back at it. Had to fix the focus. Alright, so when we go down, run your thread down about halfway. The reason why I do it halfway is because we're going to need a couple of wraps to get our thread down here by the tail. And if you have your dubbing on there, that's going to start putting dubbing onto your shank, and you don't really want that. This is one of the things that I've seen that I think is one of the biggest mistakes people make, and I can say that openly because I was about as guilty as anybody. I don't know if you can see that, but there is just I'm talking the tiniest little wisp of dubbing on my finger, just a tiny bit. Over dubbing can cause a big issue in a number of ways. Not only do you kind of lose control to shape your body the way that you want, but also what happens is it's just more material. And the more material and the more dubbing that you have, what will happen is that it's more material that's capable of absorbing water, which is the last thing you want on a dry fly. So by building a really nice, tight, lightly dubbed noodle, you have control over your body where you can make the body as uniform as you'd like, make any corrections you might need to make as you go up, and built within it is more thread than dubbing. And that'll absorb less water, make your fly more buoyant, and also, to be honest with you, more durable too. A lot more durable. You know, you get a couple of fish that really shred the crap out of your fly. If your fly is all just dubbing, they're just going to peel away dubbing, and you catch a couple fish on one fly, all of a sudden you're down to your thread, and I've seen it many times. That's what used to happen to me in my early days with all of my nymphs. You know, some of my hare's ears would really get hammered and strip them right down. So I don't know if you can see that or not. Really tight, thin noodle. And we'll take a couple of wraps just to move our thread to the back. And I'm going to pick up on my tail so I can see exactly where I tied that in. Get my first nice tight wrap there. And we're going to start moving our way up the body. And this is another example of the importance of a really good underbody. If you take the time to put on a really good underbody, the tiniest little bit of too much dubbing there, then that thread will just ride right up of what you created, and you're going to get a really nice look to your fly with a nice tight tapered body. Don't skimp on the underbody, especially if you're tying in a body material like a quill, which I'm going to do a couple of quill videos too, show you how I do that. But the underbody is very important. If you want your fly to look a certain way, if you've got a messy underbody with, you know, all kinds of nooks and crannies and things, you know, it's almost impossible to get that to look the way that you want. And we just need to add a little bit more dubbing. I mean, again, it's always easier to add more than to take off. That's another benefit of a real nice tight wound noodle. So get a few turns in there, and that should balance everything out. Like where that one wrap went, and good. So there's that body, nice and tapered. This dubbing has, you know, some little fibers tucked into it. I don't really know what they are or what they're for, but I don't really like the look of them. Get rid of that guy there, and rid of that guy. Okay. All right, Hackle. What I'm going to use on this fly is a dark barred ginger hackle. Now, this is not what I normally use for a Cahill, but if you look at that, that's off of a silver graded whiting saddle. And I gotta say, even though this isn't the type of hackle I normally use on a Cahill, I bought this saddle the other day, and I wish I had a better excuse. I just really want to use it, so that's what's going on here. So what I did is I stripped off some fibers from the bottom, alright, and you should be able to see on the underside here, I stripped off a few more fibers. And the reason why is because my first turn is going to be on that side of the stem. And if the fibers are ripped off, that first wrap that you lay down is guaranteed to be nice and tight to the shank, and the fibers will stick straight up, and that'll train all the rest of the fibers for the rest of your wraps to sit the way that you want them to sit. Another thing to mention is a lot of people ask, do you tie them in with the color facing you, color facing away? It's another area where I'm a little weird. I tie my hackle in perpendicular to the shank with a couple of tight wraps back to the dubbing, and then I make one wrap behind it that'll help stand that up. Okay, so now the hackle's kind of standing up a little bit for me, and then I'm going to move my way down to the eye, and I'm all good to go. Now, normally I don't tie with a rotary vise. I've got a rotary, this isn't a rotary vise right now, that I just bought, and I like it. I'm not a huge fan of it, but rotary's okay. I much prefer to tie on a stationary vise and do all my stuff by hand. But today it's in the rotary vise. I'm going to use the rotary function. In some of the videos I make in the future, I'll show you how I do it by hand. That's the way that I prefer to do it, but we'll use the rotary function for this. First turn's really important. Get that out. Get that real tight to the shank. I got one errant wing material here that I want to get rid of, which happens. And if you get something like that, make sure you get rid of it. Sometimes that can tease fibers to go places you don't want them to go. Okay, so nice and tight, and I've got the hackle facing me, and I'm just going to start turning my vise and just watching the stem, making sure that I'm making touching wraps and the hackle is going on the way I want. Once I reach my wings, I'm going to stop. The reason why I stop is because the next turn is really important. If the next turn does not go on straight, then the rest of your fibers are going to splay all over the place. If you ever tie a dry fly and your fibers are just all over the place, all bushy and weird looking, that's one of the reasons why. So I'm going to fold my wings back a little bit, and I'm going to make sure that that next wrap goes right in front of the wings, nice and tight. And then once that's tight, I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to continue turning the vise, and I'm going to go all the way to the eye on this. I'm not going to leave a gap. All the way to the eye. And the reason why I go all the way to the eye is for a specific reason. I like a nice, neat finish to my flies, and the way you get that is actually pretty easy. I'm going to hold my feather upright. Whoops, bobbin holder in the way. Hold my feather upright, and I'm going to make a nice, tight wrap to lock that hackle down. Then I'm going to come around with a nice, tight second wrap, and that's all locked in there. Now, you can see all these feathers in front here, or these fibers in front, that you're obviously going to cut off. If you cut them off right now, what's going to happen is that you're guaranteed to get a little bit sticking out, and then when you lock in the whip finish, it's going to lay over the eye of the hook. Believe me, fish don't care, but I like my flies to look a certain way, so I want to avoid that. And the way that you do that is you take your index finger on the top of your fly, and you peel those fibers back with your index finger. And as you peel them back, you're going to slip a couple of thread wraps right in there. And what that's going to do is it's going to train those fibers back. Now when you cut off the excess, now the excess is going to be tucked back into your hackle, and you're not even going to see it. So I got my thread back here on my material holder. I'm going to come in here with my scissors as tightly as I can, slip them right in there, get rid of that. Everything is now locked in, and I can take my whip finishing tool, which I strongly prefer. I'm making whip finish by hand, but I do enjoy the tool. And we'll get a few turns in there. Get out of there. Good. Now, every once in a while you trap a couple errant fibers, and that happens. I get happy when it doesn't happen, but what are you going to do? So we'll pull those tight, get them out of there. Straighten the tail out, make sure that all my hackles sit in the way I want, and we're good to go. That's a size 14 Cahill on a light wire hook. So look from it up top with the wings, the tail splayed out, hackle sitting up nice and straight. So there's a lot of little things that if you pay attention to, your materials will lay a lot better. The underbody will give you that nice tapered body that you're looking for. The hackle will stand up nice and straight if you pay attention to details with that. And that's a size 14 Cahill. Subscribe, hit like, all that good stuff, and we'll be coming out with more videos soon.